Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Jewish Voice for Peace, to B-Shvat. My name is Barbara Barefield, and I am a founding member of the Jewish Voice for Peace Detroit chapter. I'd also like to thank the Jewish Voice for Peace Havurah Network for supporting and helping us, and our guides for Rabbi Brant Rosen and Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb for helping us develop this program today. Nadia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Nadia Aldajani. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a newer member of JVP Detroit calling from Ann Arbor. I'm just doing my postdoctorate here right now in clinical psychology. I was born in Jordan to Palestinian family. I am Palestinian, and I'll be speaking a little bit more about that later on in the program, and excited to be with you all today.
I grew up in New York in a predominantly Jewish community. Many of the things that we'll be talking about this afternoon were things that I did not learn about until I was an adult and became a member of Jewish Voice for Peace. I was told by my temple in Sunday school and Hebrew school that Israel was a land without people, and the Jewish people were a people without land. On Tu B'Shvat, we would collect coins so that we could plant trees in the desert in Israel. We were not aware, we were not told that there was a thriving people and a thriving land there. And those are some of the things that I know we will be talking about today. So today we also will acknowledge some of the catastrophic consequences of forced displacement of people from their homes and their land. Palestinians, Jewish people, and here in the US. So it is right to begin this program with some land acknowledgements. So if you haven't already entered in the chat, your name, your pronouns, where you're from, and land acknowledgement, please do that as well. I would like to acknowledge the people I'm from Detroit, so that's the land acknowledgement I would like to make as we start this program. In Detroit, we occupy the contemporary and ancestral homelands of the three Anishinaabe nations of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi. And please excuse me if I am pronouncing these wrong. I tried hard. The Detroit Indigenous Peoples Alliance passed a resolution in City Council renaming Detroit Wewiyatanang, a word that articulates Detroit to the water. It has been a central meeting place for the Great Lakes Indigenous people, including the Anishinaabe tribes, the Wyandot and Iroquoian agricultural people living in the permanent settlements around Lake Erie, called the Detroit area the land of many beavers, Tushka Grandi. If you have not already done so, again, please introduce yourself into the chat. And we would like to especially thank Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb and Rabbi Brant Rosen for their guidance. Nadia?
Yes, I have the pleasure of introducing Rabbi Lynn. So Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb is a pioneer feminist rabbi, storyteller, percussionist, peace educator, writer, ceremonialist, community activist, and clown. She's deeply committed to a life grounded in the creativity, joy, and wisdom of the Torah of nonviolence. Her journey includes lifelong activism with the Fellowship of Reconciliation, an ongoing pursuit of Israeli-Palestinian conflict transformation based on principles of active nonviolence. She's one of the first women to become a rabbi in Jewish history, is a pioneer Jewish feminist, human rights activist, writer, visual artist, ceremonialist, community educator, and a master storyteller. I will be putting her website in the chat so you can read more about Rabbi Lynn later.
And I would like to briefly introduce Rabbi Brant Rosen. Tikkun magazine editor Rabbi Michael Lerner describes Rabbi Brant Rosen as at once a courageous rabbi and the voice of a new generation of American Jews who are refusing to allow the right-wing voices of the Jewish world to define Judaism. And I also will put his website into the chat so you can read more about him. Now, if you would please open up to page 2 of your Haggadah. I'm going to put, if you didn't receive it through email, I am putting a link to the Haggadah into the chat right now, and we will begin reading on page 2. Tu B'Shvat is the birthday of trees. It has been celebrated many different ways in Jewish history, changing to meet the needs of passing generations. It has been an agricultural event, a tax deadline, a communal feast, a Kabbalistic rite, and a national holiday. Today, as activists working for peace and justice in Israel and Palestine and throughout the world, we join the Jewish tradition of remaking tradition to observe Tu B'Shvat as a festival dedicated to healing and reconciliation. This year's Tu B'Shvat, we affirm the unity of all people and acknowledge our duty to learn, reflect, and take action. On this Tu B'Shvat, we listen to ancient calls to protect the earth, to love our neighbors, and to renew our commitment to environment, political, and social justice.
We come together prepared to take on the responsibility of Tikkun Ulam, the work of preparing our broken world with humility. This is the 74th year anniversary of both the founding of the State of Israel and the resulting Nakba, meaning catastrophe, for the Palestinian people. They have lived on this land for so many generations, protecting it with the shade of their olive trees and the nourishment of their gardens. It is right and necessary for us to humbly and respectfully express our caring appreciation for the Palestinian people. They, under great adversity, held on to their love, humility, respect, and caring for the land, its trees, and its bounty, sharing these precious gifts in peace and with great generosity with the many Jewish Holocaust refugees who fled to Palestine at the end of World War II. On this holiday, then, we've gathered to consider trees, what trees have meant to Jews and Palestinians historically, and what trees mean today in the land of Israel, Palestine.
This is the world's first reusable.
So, can I read yours?
Yeah, right here.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to ask everyone except the reader to please
Guys, I'm sorry.
mute themselves.
Just start.
Trees were planted in the very beginning of our stories about ourselves as a people, and trees have been both victims and cruel ammunition in the ongoing campaigns of Israeli Jews to seize Palestinian land and farms. This special place for trees has always been part of Jewish culture. Our Torah is understood as the tree of life. Special rules have always been set for trees. Trees were understood to be necessary for life, and trees have often been used as a metaphor for humans. Here are a few stories from Jewish history. When in your war against a city, you must besiege it a long time. You must not destroy its trees by forcing an axe against them. You may eat of them, but you must not cut them down. We are told that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai used to say, if you are holding a sapling in your hands and someone announces the Messiah's arrival, plant the sapling and after that, go meet the Messiah. In the age of the prophets, trees were often metaphors for humans, such as Isaiah's proclamation, I will plant in the wilderness the cedar, the acacia tree, the myrtle, and the olive tree. I will set in the desert the cypress, the plane tree, and the larch together, that they may see and know and consider and understand together. When a tree that bears fruit is cut down, its moan goes from one end of the world to the other, yet no sound is heard. We celebrate the place that trees have held in our history and traditions. We eat almonds, chestnuts, hazelnuts, and pistachios. Tree nuts in honor of the substance and sustenance that we harvest from trees. We eat dates and figs to celebrate the sweetness that trees provide in our lives and in our communities. We eat olives, the fruit of a tree so central to our cultural history that it is the very symbol of shalom, wholeness, and completeness. And we drink the fruit of the grape with hope that justice will prevail.
Okay. With ignorance and good intentions, Jews donated money to plant trees in Israel for every birth and bar mitzvah and memorial for so many decades. We drop pennies into blue boxes for the dream of making the desert bloom, unaware that our generosity contributed to the destruction of millions of Palestinian olive trees and the planting of millions of non-native trees. We now know that the founding and settlement of Israel and all the planting of trees by Jews before and after its founding had catastrophic consequences for Palestinians and for the land itself. We know the land was not empty, nor was it a barren desert, wasted or in need of redemption. In this Seder, we break this silence to reveal a painful story. We know these consequences have not been part of the story of Tu B'Shvat, but this year in this Seder, we include the other side of the story. And if I may editorialize just a bit, I was reading an article on Haaretz yesterday about Israel is now boasting about how many trees it's planting for climate change to protect the environment, and it's not mentioning any and olive trees and other trees that it's destroyed on Palestine. So this is still going on. To quote from Asher Ginsburg from 1891, we abroad are used to believing that Eretz Israel is now almost totally desolate, a desert that is not sowed, and that anyone who wishes to purchase land there may come and purchase as much as he desires. But in truth, this is not the case. Throughout the country, it is difficult to find fields that are not sowed. Only sand dunes and stony mountains that are not fit to grow anything but fruit trees, and this only after hard labor and great expense of clearing and reclamation. Only these are not cultivated. Miriam?
My apologies, I'm on mute. Miriam will be with us shortly. She's finished.
Joshua, we skipped a portion. We're going to go back to Rabbi Lynn. And we accidentally jumped into the trees in our stories before we heard from Rabbi Lynn. So
Okay. We'll come back to me later.
yes, we will.
Okay, sure. Well, welcome, Rabbi Lynn.
Marhaba, thank you. Greetings, everyone. It is an old custom before we begin a ceremony, whatever that ceremony is, to take a moment and remember what is still unhealed, what is still an open wound among us. And this remembering, Zechel Chorban, or in Arabic, Nakba, is the way that we can come forward and say, in order to attain reconciliation, we must first undergo reparations and acknowledgement of what is an open wound and who this wound impacts, and to make space first and foremost for people to speak their wound in their own language, even without translation, so that we who are causing the wound can be a silent witness, fueled into repair, guided by the tactics of those who bear the harm. Because our differences should not define who benefits from the state and who is marginalized by it. And so today we acknowledge, that is to say, Jewish people with privilege acknowledge our role as colonial settlers in establishment of the Israeli state. And I would like to read the Nakba of the Trees, a voice by Huwaida Arraf, a Gazan-based poet and blogger penning life under occupation. And his book called Still Living There reminds me too of Indigenous friends I know who have to constantly remind colonial settlers in the United States, we are still here. We are not the past, we are the present, and we are the future. And so Muhammad says, the breeze stopped suddenly, the skies filled with black clouds. There was no rain. A piece of that high crescent looked at me. It disappeared. Willows' leaves were withered and crisped over me. They were yellow. Branches wanted to cry, but they did not. The scene was dreary and sullen. It was late on a Friday in October. Around me, olive trees were not harvested yet. I walked miles to arrive at this area under the cold and freezing weather, under the storms racing into the forest. But I had the intention and I arrived. My heart was volcanic, but sometimes trembling like the autumn's leaf. I stood on a high hill, a hill overlooking Jerusalem and the occupied lands, but I could see nothing. It was dark. I wanted to see my old home, my swing, the broken table in the yard, my mother's domestics and her smell, my father's planets and his smell, his cart and the strong white mare, the orange orchard of my grandmother, her little walker beside the trees and her wheelchair, the great wall near the golden mosque, the great bell of the huge church, the dome of the rock, the wide hall, the fountain of prayers. But I woke up. No one woke me. It was only a dream, a hard dream, a simple dream, a quick dream. I picked up my father's old home key. It was under my pillow. I kissed it, hugged it. My tears cried over it and said, I miss the people who held you. I miss the people who held you. May this prayer be dedicated to the right of return quickly in our day and in the replanting of all the slain trees so they may cry no more. I believe this is the moment where I invite you to think about the spirit trees in your lives, the trees that when you stand before them or this tree, whether it was your childhood backyard tree or a tree that you encounter in the woods that heals you, or the fragrance and memories that a taste of tree fruit invokes, as we listen to Flori Jagoda sing of the trees in Ladino, we remember that a different future is possible and that we can celebrate the dignity of trees and ourselves when we have fulfilled our obligation of reparations. So share the tree that you dedicate this ceremony to on this day as we play this melody. Barbara, I don't know if we can't hear the melody.
Barbara, are we supposed to eat something? Because we just hear like scratching and stuff like that.
Barbara, can you hear us? We can't hear the melody. If you close the YouTube and
You're on mute, Barbara.
yeah. It's not the same song. It's a different song. The song we heard when we entered is a song of Feiruz, Ya Taya.
Can you hear it now?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's say you have to read an incredibly long email from your boss that you have to finish before the big meeting starts in 10 minutes.
Technical problems here. Sorry. Okay, we will go back to our reading now, and I think Miriam or Joshua. We're going to be reading from page 3 and 4, The Myth and the Disaster.
Thank you. So this picks up from, first of all, thank you to the rabbi for the lovely comments and the speech. We appreciate you being here. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes, I will be substituting, although obviously I can never fill Miriam's shoes, I shall endeavor just to read her parts. In parks created by the Jewish National Fund, you will often see the ruins of houses, a fortress, orchards, cactuses or cacti, and so on. And so forth. There are also many fig and almond trees. Most Israelis think of these as, quote, wild figs or, quote, wild almonds. But these trees were planted by human hands. In village. These trees are all that remain, and that is adopted from the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Further, the JMF parks have established on the lands of 86 destroyed villages. These forestation programs have held up as an inspiring example of sound environmental management. I mean, one thing you have to hand it to the Israelis is they certainly are good at marketing. With the JNF boasting that it has planted 240 million trees in Israel and cares for 100,000 acres of, quote, national woodlands. As was mentioned earlier in our Seder, what is not mentioned here is that the tree of choice has been the fast-growing European pine that's useful for rapidly concealing rubble of Palestinian homes underneath the forest's evergreen canopy. And that in the process, the JNF has decimated indigenous species, that is the trees themselves, to make way for the pine. As the Israeli scholar Uri Davis notes of the forestation activity is not charitable as the JNF would have you believe. It is actually a war crime. The forests of the Jewish National Fund are there to veil this criminality. Jonathan Cook, Disappearing Palestine, 2008. I would like to add a comment that, going back to Barbara's introduction earlier about the way I was raised, of the idea of Israel being that shining city on the hill, can do no wrong, and we would give our money to Israel to build the country. And I'm much younger than I look. This is the 70s and 80s. What pains me is even today, my own family, my own parents are still funding things such as this. And as a member of JVP, obviously it's difficult to try to get them to change their mind, almost like a person who's a MAGA. Like, it's hard to get them to change their mind. So this resonates very deeply today in terms of we give money to JNF, to these things, and we think we're doing the right thing, when in actuality we're enabling enabling an apartheid state. So thank you. I'll pass. That's it. There would be the Rabbi Alan Alpert would be up
Right.
next.
I'm not sure if Rabbi Alana is able to come. It depended on whether her babies were going to be cooperative. So I'm assuming that they're not. So
Okay.
So-
So I can pass or continue, whatever you would like, Barbara.
why don't we have Kim? Kim, would you like to read the section, and then you can continue, Kim Redigan, and then you can make your presentation? Are you able to unmute Kim Redigan?
Sure. Are you sure you want me to read this big piece before speaking, Barb?
I can read from 4 to 7.
I have a special guest star who's just showed up.
Oh, Miriam, you can
Although-
read
well-
number 4 through number 7.
She's like, what are you talking about? But it's the first time seeing it, so.
Okay,
Okay. All right.
number 4.
Yeah, you can leave out the rabbi part.
Okay. Jewish villages were built in the place of Arab villages. You don't even know the names of these Arab villages, and I don't blame you, because these geography books no longer exist. Not only do the books not exist, the Arab villages are not there either. Nahalal arose in the place of Ma'lul, Javat in the place of Jibta, Sarid in the place of Hanifa, and Kfar Yehusha in the place of Tel Shaman. There is not one single place built in this country that did not have a former Arab population. Right.
Yes, please.
The field workers went to ask the old man for what reason he is crying, and he answered in a low crying voice, "This was the last time that I collect my olives." Hundreds of thousands of olives, citrus, almond, date, and other trees have been uprooted. These trees and orchards constituted a source, and in many cases, the only source of livelihood for hundreds of thousands of people. Many had invested their savings to develop and improve their family farms with costly greenhouses and irrigation networks, only to see them destroyed by Israeli army bulldozers. What will my children inherit from me? Nothing but poverty. Palestinian farmer whose land had been annexed, November 2002.
No, you're good.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you so much, Kim.
Yeah,
Thank you for
Hi.
joining us.
of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Redigan, and I'm a member of Meta Peace Team and a longtime friend of Jewish Voice for Peace. MPT places domestic and international violence de-escalation teams in places when we're invited and where we're invited. For 20 years, we've responded to the call from the International Solidarity Movement. You'll hear from Huwaida after me, who was one of the co-founders of that, as well as Palestinian civil society, to place peace teams in the West Bank and Gaza. I volunteered twice in the West Bank. I was part of the Gaza Freedom March, and I've recently served on 2 peace teams to the US-Mexico border. It's really good that in a world of walls, whether in Palestine or along the southern border, we're gathering today to subvert the building of walls by planting trees. Trees whose roots really have no respect for borders. Last year, I was asked to write a piece on trees, of all things, for G's magazine. And I'd like to read a short excerpt from that reflection, given the focus of our Seder today, before sharing a few short experiences of my time in Palestine. So this piece is called Radical Rootedness. On an April day in the West Bank village of Bidu, our peace team witnessed ancient olive trees ripped from the ground by a confluence of machines and military, an act of violence that drove us to our knees in grief. Years later, I danced among the olive groves in a small village in Greece with my great aunt Dimitra, where ancestral trees brought me back home to myself, awakening something deep inside that speaks truth older than history. Palestine and Greece, the same Mediterranean sun throbbing against a canvas of brilliant blue, the same terraced hills undulating like patterned green blankets, the same brown ground, solid and familiar beneath sandaled feet. But the trees, such different fates, making all the difference in the world. Trees matter because it's all about the roots, how we tear them out, how we tend them, how we see them or don't. The etymology of the word radical is root. Trees challenge us to lay deep roots and embrace the radicality of our vocation as truth tellers, justice seekers, peacemakers. To cultivate the simplicity, beauty, and graciousness of those ancient trees under whose weathered limbs we sometimes celebrate, but far too often lament. Trees throughout history have stood as silent sentries, witness bearers to the full range of human experience. When we're overcome by anger or grief, we can follow their stalwart lead and plant our feet firmly in the struggle for justice, singing in the words of the civil rights song, we shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. So when I think of Palestine, I think of those who refuse to be moved. I think of the Bedouin cave community I stayed with in Gawis in the South Hebron Hills, who were threatened by armed hilltop settlers, and how this small group of families stood firm day after day as they took their animals out to graze. I think of how they traveled to the settlement of Kiryat Arba to return the pellets that had poisoned their sheep. I think of the Palestinian families in Al Khalil refusing to move despite the constant harassment, the checkpoints, the intimidation. Our peace team got a small taste of this one night when settlers, accompanied by barking dogs, banged on the door of our apartment off and on throughout the night. The Palestinian family next door said they live with this kind of night terror all the time. I think of the protest in Belayim, where Palestinians, Israelis, and internationals marched each week through clouds of tear gas that would envelop orchards and waft through the homes in the village. On our first day there, we were outside drinking tea with a family when a group of soldiers rounded the corner, got into formation, and threw a percussion grenade directly at our small group. I'll never forget the screams of the little 2-year-old girl sitting next to me and the sound of crashing glass. I think of Bassem Abu Rama, or Phil, the beloved heart of the community, a true man of peace who was killed after being shot in the chest with a tear gas canister during a demonstration. 2 years later, his sister was asphyxiated by tear gas. I think of a night in Berlin that changed my life. I hesitate to share this story because I do not want to romanticize or spiritualize the horror of occupation. But on this night, I really did, I think, catch a glimpse of what Dr. King was speaking of when he talks of the beloved community. It had been a long day. The march that day was in honor of Rachel Khoury. That night, the entire village hosted the party of all parties, food beyond belief, music, hookah, Palestinians, Israeli activists, and internationals sitting at long tables in front of Abdullah's house. It was a beautiful April night, warm and clear. The occasion was the release of an Israeli activist from a Tel Aviv hospital who'd been injured when he was hit in the head with a projectile during a demonstration in Berlin. When Jonathan arrived, the residents of Berlin applauded and presented him an award in Arabic, Hebrew, and English. And then the party began in earnest. I really had a sense that this is what the world is supposed to look like, until Israeli military vehicles arrived looking for a child that they said had thrown rocks at the day's demonstration. People tried to get the vehicles to turn around. We agreed to spend the night in the family's home, and the party dispersed. I apologize for speaking so long. I really could go on and on. What I learned is that we're all responsible for tikkun olam, for healing the world and stepping into the fullness of our humanity. I believe that healing is possible, that justice is possible, that peace is possible. I do believe that the day will come when everyone will sit under their own vine and fig tree and no one will make them afraid. We're planning teams to Palestine for this summer and for the olive harvest, and really would invite anyone who's interested to talk to me about coming with us on a peace team. And I really want to give a profound thank you to Jewish Voice for Peace. It's been a wonderful journey walking with you for many years. So thank you. And I think we're going to turn it over to one of my role models, and actually the first person who introduced us on our peace team to life in Palestine. And that is our dear friend from Detroit, Huwaida Arraf. Thank you.
My gosh, Kim, thank you so much for your words. Thank you so much for your kind words towards me. Thank you, everyone, really, for inviting me to be here. Barbara and JVP, thank you for organizing this beautiful gathering, and again, for inviting me to take part. I mentioned when I introduced myself in the comments that I'm joining you today from Berkeley, but I was born and raised in Detroit. I am currently living in Southeast Detroit, in actually Macomb County. Some of you may know I'm also running for Congress in Michigan. And I bring that up because I've been speaking a lot to people about my campaign. And I always get the question, how are you going to deal with the attacks of being anti-Semitic? And I say that, well, I'm going to tell the truth. Everything that I've ever stood for and fought for has been for human rights, for everyone, the right for everyone to live in dignity. And I think that that is a right that everybody wants, whether in China, Palestine, or in Detroit, or wherever all of you are coming from. It is a simple and basic human need. And then I think of all of the wonderful people that I've worked with, and you all, and how powerful we are as a gathering that are fighting together for this, and how much more we have left to go. So I'm not going to be idealistic in any way. But Kim mentioned I wasn't thinking to talk much about ISM, but just a few words. When I went over to Palestine, it was shortly after I graduated from college, I went over to work for a conflict resolution program, and it brought Palestinians and Israeli Jews together, and Israeli also Palestinians together. And it was to talk about, to break down barriers and to learn more about each other and build a new generation of leaders that is going to lead us into a brighter, better future. I didn't stay with that program for very long, because you know what the problem was? Not that dialogue is ever wrong, but that when we look past what is tearing people apart and just masking it with learning to get along, you're not telling the truth. And what we heard here previously in these beautiful reflections and acknowledgement of the deep relationship between Palestinians and their land and their trees, and what the destruction of those trees and that land has meant, the displacement of Palestinians. A lot of these programs, and certainly the one that I was working for, wasn't necessarily interested in getting at that truth. And so we're just talking about getting along without tackling the root cause of what is tearing people apart. And again, we need to acknowledge what has happened. We need to acknowledge it so that we can heal and get past it and learn to live together. And so why did I come to found the International Solidarity Movement? I was there and saw this grave injustice, and what do I do about it? What can I do about it? When Palestinians were marching, protesting the uprooting of their trees, the demolition of their land, the demolition of their homes, people were being confronted and attacked by big, huge Israeli military forces that were opening fire on people. Every single demonstration I was in, and I was lucky because a lot of people were injured, some were seriously injured, and some were killed in these popular demonstrations. And nobody was holding Israel accountable for Palestinian lives. The mainstream media was calling it, at best, it was a conflict or clashes, never the truth of what was really happening. And most the United States and many other countries were blaming Palestinians for their own deaths, because why did we walk away from the negotiating table? Why do we walk away from a peace process and decide to start protesting? And so I wanted to find a way to get the truth more out there. And one of them was see if people from all over the world would answer a call from us to come and join in what looked like a violent place to be. But maybe they would come to stand with Palestinians and to stand in front of these soldiers and these tanks and these bulldozers and say no. And not because, they were taking the side of Palestinians against Israelis or against Jews, but because they were taking the side of freedom and justice against colonization and occupation and violence. And I'm grateful to Kim and the thousands and thousands of others from nearly 40 countries from around the world that have come to Palestine in the last 20 years and then have gone back home to their home countries to spread the word. And that is one thing that Palestinians, if you've been, tell more than anything to internationals that come, we're grateful for you being here, but go home. That's where the work is. Tell people what's happening, because certainly Palestinians don't feel like they're heard. And like Kim said, there's so much more to say, but I feel personally very grateful and honored to have worked with so many wonderful people across all kinds of lines, things that are supposed to divide us by your country, your nationality, your religion, your age, and it's not, it's coming together to stand for a principle that is about freedom. And that's what even I'm getting from this gathering. Just like imagine if more people didn't let these barriers drive us apart. Imagine if we could envision for Palestine, for Palestinians and Israelis, for people here, a gathering like this where we're together and celebrating more each other's cultures, each other's religions, and didn't see them as a threat to our own in any way. And sometimes when we look at what we're up against, the powers of the countries and the governments and the money, and even in politics now as a candidate, how much money you have is so important in getting the message out. I try to go back to the kind of beauty and selflessness and power of the people that have come, and the Palestinian people that are remaining steadfast, seeing their trees uprooted, losing their sons and daughters and loved ones, and still hope that there is something better. And it's coincidence I'm wearing a pair of earrings. Some of you can see this Arabic calligraphy, but it is a quote by Albert Camus. And it's a small quote that's part of the bigger. In this quote that's written on my earrings in Arabic calligraphy, it says, the English translation of it is, "In the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer." And if some of you know the longer letter or quote from Albert Camus in The Stranger, it says, "In the midst of hate, I found there was within me an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found there was within me an invincible smile. In the midst of chaos, I found there was within me an invincible calm. I realized through it all that in the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer." And people could probably, interpret that in the way they want. But for me, it's as bad as things get. We have the power within ourselves always to do something for change. And it's something that I'm passing along to my kids. It's something that I hold on to. It's something I believe you probably all already know, because you're here and you're a part of this, and you're doing great work in your communities, but it's always helpful to be reminded. So again, thank you for inviting me to be part of this beautiful gathering. I'm honored and look forward to hearing and being part of the rest of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Huwaida. We are so honored to have you and Kim as part of this afternoon's event. And now we're going to continue on in reading out of the Haggadah. And Melissa, I think it is your turn. Or is it David Finkel? Actually, it's David Finkel.
Right. This is starting with 8. The decision as to what to plant in forests grown over destroyed Palestinian villages, fields, and olive groves was left totally to the Jewish National Fund. Almost from the start, the JNF executive had opted mainly for European conifers instead of the natural flora indigenous to Palestine. But these pine trees failed to adapt to the local soil, and despite repeated treatment, disease kept afflicting the trees. This is why forests throughout Israel today include only 11% of indigenous species. In the village of Katana, the land was divided by the Green Line in 1949, and many olive trees belonging to villagers that were located on the Israeli side of the boundary were sold to a nearby kibbutz. After 1967, the villagers once again had access to their trees, and gradually they reestablished their use of the orchards. Realizing that Ottoman law would substantiate ownership claims if the practice persisted, the Israeli government uprooted over 3,000 trees from Katana and transplanted them to various sites around Israel.
But the farmers in many of the farmers in the village have farmed their olive trees all their lives. And to many of them, the olive trees are like their children. The JNF, an organization dedicated to the development of Israeli state land for the benefit of its Jewish population, was planting pine forests in areas declared as state land. These planting programs were undertaken to prevent Palestinian planting and to maintain land reserves for new settlements or for the future expansion of existing ones. Pine trees were chosen both because of their fast growth and because of the acidic deposit of pine needles they leave on the ground, which eradicates most smaller plants and undergrowth between the trees. Pine deserts were meant to make the land unusable for Palestinian shepherds by depriving their flocks of pasture. They have tried to get me off this land in every way they can think of, Ali said. He pointed to a thick forest of pine trees to the west and told me they had been planted 30 years ago on the land of a relative of his. The JNF accused him of failing to cultivate his fields regularly enough, so they established the forest on them. He said, I am determined not to make the same mistake. That's from the other side of Israel, my journey across the Jewish-Arab divide.
The act of tree planting, so cherished by American Jews as a way of supporting Israeli and Jewish aspirations for nurture and stability, has been perverted. Today on the West Bank, the presence of olive trees is often deemed illegal. Palestinian orchards, as well as newly planted trees, are being uprooted and transplanted on Israeli soil. Why? If the land remains uncultivated for 3 years, the Israeli government can claim it. If the land sports no house, it too can be claimed. And if there is a house, it may be bulldozed. Land on the West Bank is slowly being dragged from Palestinian control. Slowly push them back and back until the land is empty, as some had pretended it was from the start. Need I say that this contradicts what I have always been taught were Jewish values: the sense of justice, of legal order, of respect for other human beings, the necessity for culture, roots, and self-determination. That's Arina Klutfish, Yom HaShoah, Yom Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim from 1987. If the olive trees knew the hands that planted them, their oil would have become fierce. That's from Mahmoud Darwish from Mount Carmel is in us. Mount Carmel is in us. We too can break through what has been planted in us. Myths, denial, and erasing from history, we can choose a different path. My task now is to engage in the work of repairing the damage done across the land called Israel and Palestine, and to create conditions in which Jews and
Hello, everyone. It's such an honor to be part of this gathering. Again, my name is Brant Rosen. I'm the rabbi of the congregation Tzedek Chicago. I'm a longtime member of Jewish Voice for Peace. And we come now to the eating of the first category of food, because this is a Seder. Seders involve, among other things, the eating of certain symbolic foods. So the first category of food in our Seder is represented by fruit that have hard external shells, but are edible on the inside. So I believe there were some of these categories were shared with you before the Seder. This would include almonds, oranges, walnuts, or pomegranates, whatever you have handy, as long as it has a hard external shell and an edible inside. That is the correct food for this part of the Seder. According to Jewish mysticism, these foods symbolize the world of Asiyah, the physical temporal world. Asiyah also embodies the land and our collective responsibility to live justly upon it. For our Seder today, we're going to highlight one of these foods, the prickly pear cactus. This is a fruit that has rich cultural associations. It grows widely throughout the Americas and is particularly ubiquitous in Mexico. The Aztecs used the petals of the plant, called nopales, to make juice, which was then used medicinally for a wide variety of illnesses. The nopales are still an important part of Mexican cuisine to this day. The prickly pear is also indigenous to the land of Palestine, where it is known in Arabic as sabr. The sabr fruit is extremely hardy and has a particular significance for Palestinians. Today, we can see it growing widely on the ruins of Palestinian villages that were ethnically cleansed by Israeli militias in 1948 and 49. In Arabic, sabr means patience. There is a well-known Palestinian mantra, sabr wa samud, patience and steadfastness. Like much of Palestinian culture, modern-day Israel has appropriated the symbolism of the sabr, referring to it in Hebrew as sabra, and identifying it with Israeli national character. But even as Israel dispossesses Palestinians from their lands and plunders their indigenous culture, we affirm this Tu B'Shvat, that nothing can erase the enduring power of sabr wa samud, patience and steadfastness. As we affirm this sacred truth, let us now say the blessing for the foods represented by the world of Asiyah, the food of sustenance and resistance. And I will type the words in transliterated Hebrew and English into the chat now. And please feel free to say together with me, either in Hebrew or in English or both, or simply say Amen at the end, and any of those will do the trick. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri ha'etz. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, Spirit of the universe, creator of the fruit of the tree.
Amen.
We will now hear from George Khoury. George, are you with us?
George? Is it George or me?
It's George Khoury.
No, my on the sheet that I have, my name is first. It's up to you.
Nabil, you're going to be reading from the Haggadah, but before that we have
Sorry.
That's okay. So George Khoury is a Nakba survivor, a neighbor. He's been an inspiration to me, a source of knowledge, and a leader of Palestinian rights and social justice. And George, are you with us?
Unmute, George.
Okay, now we're okay. Yeah, thank you, Barbara, and thanks, JVP, for having this occasion in which I have to say something. And that's something that I'm going to, and I like to say, is that tremendous pressure in my head about being realistic and being human and being Christian and being Jewish, and the whole thing get together in such a way that makes picture so unclear. And I have to admit it, that it is unclear. When I go into an activity that is Jewish, quote unquote Jewish, I really don't know where I am going into. Is it religious term, Jewish? Is it nationality? What the hell is it? Why am I in conflict with them? Why do they want my house? Why do they want the place I used to play in? I don't understand that. When I look into history, the Canaanites were there. Then came the Hebrews. Are these the Hebrews, or these are something else called Jewish now? And all of a sudden, they go into places, destroying it as they wish. It doesn't fit together with the image of who is a Jew. It's supposed to be a very kind person, a person that does not do harm to anybody because the way the religion construct him not to do or what to do. And yet they do what seems to me, what their teachings say, don't do. Simply don't do what you are doing. Even if you are in any country, like I am here now for the last 50 years, I'm a guest from the Americans. I thank every American native for letting me in. Why don't the Jews come into my country and thank me for letting them in? Just like I'm asking the natives in America to forgive me for coming into their life. The whole thing is so confusing to the point where I don't want to give up, but yet I want to be effective, and I don't know exactly how to be effective with that kind of atmosphere. I'm an Nakba survivor. I was born in 42. And believe me, for some reason, I remember everything where I was before the Nakba, between 42 and 48. I remember a lot. And then I related to what I read and what I know and the teachings, and etc. I relate to it, and I see that what has been done is definitely wrong. It's not correct. Morally, it's not correct. So how can anybody to say, well, I want to raise the trees and I don't want to harm the trees, but I want to harm the people. We are the trees of the earth. We are the people. So when somebody comes in and kick me out of my house and then saves the tree, I say, what kind of bullshit is this? I am the tree of this land. So how do you kick me out and you justify it? I even don't know what the justification is. And yet you are saving the tree, which is fine. I will save the tree with you. What happened on the day in 48? Just a week before that, there were jeeps. The jeeps were driven by what I learned to be a Haganah at the time. The Haganah became the Israeli Defense Force. And the jeeps have a loudspeaker. And the loudspeaker was saying, we are going to ask you to leave your home, but you will be back in a week or two. I remember that very well. And then came some leaflets, which I took the leaflet and I went home. I said to my dad and my mom, what does this say? This say, if you want your children to live, leave. Leave what? To condominium. Because we were living, the idea of condominium was there then. We were in Jaffa, and in that there were lots of condominiums in one area. In the middle of it, there was some fountain and hibiscus flowers, etc. And it says, if you love your kids, leave. How does that go with, don't take anything with you? That's another thing the loudspeaker was saying. Don't take anything with you because you'll be back in a week or two. Well, I went back in 2014 and I followed the map that my family gave me to go to where I used to live in Jaffa. And I went there and I got into the main gate, and the lady who was there for some reason in the section where my condominium was, because it has a walkway all around, and you can walk from, just like a hotel, from one condominium to the other, one room to the other. And she said, "Inti shu baddak?" with a very broken Arabic. What do you want? I said, I just want to look at my house. And she said, "Hada mish beitak, khalas, mish beitak. This is not your house. Get out of here. And if you don't go away from here, I'm going to call the police." Well, Less than 2 minutes later, the police was there. And he said, what are you doing here? You are interfering in somebody's living. I said, no, this is my house. I just want to see my house. He said, it's not your house anymore. We want you to get it through your thick skull. This is not your house anymore. And I said, I just want to know if they are using our utensils and sheets. She felt insulted when I said that. And he came to me and he said, if you don't leave, I'm going to arrest you. He was a Durzi Arab. I refer to them as Druze because there are different religions and Jews, Muslims, Christians, but they speak Arabic. And the Israeli army took advantage of them knowing very, very good Arabic. And I said, you're going to arrest me if I don't leave. But you understood what I said. He said, yeah, I understood what you say. Come on, get out of here. And they kicked me out of the main gate and I went back to the street. And of course, I flagged a taxi cab and he took me away to where I wanted to go. That day, when they kick us out, a Jeep came with a cover on it. He opened the cover and he let my family first, my mom and 6 kids, I'm one of them, into the Jeep. And then there was another older couple, Julius and his wife, came with us and he drove east. Of course, I don't know where was east or was west at the time, but later on I learned to learn that it was east from Jaffa all the way toward the inside of Israel, away from the shore. And well, he closed the cover and about, I will say 15, 20 minutes, he stopped, opened the cover and he said, get out, everybody get out. We got out and it was a mess. Hundreds of people in that area. And the noise, the buses coming in, the trucks coming in, loading people. I mean, it was like confusion. Nobody even know, it's not organized confusion because in organized confusion, you know where you're going and he knows where you're going, she knows where he's going. But the thing that everybody is going, in our case, we didn't know where anybody is going, you know? So we gathered around my mother. And by the way, my mother was a little bit smarter than us. She put the underwear, the underwear, she put a little pocket with some kind of clip. And later on, I got to know that clip has money in it. In case we get lost or stolen or whatever, and with the confusion, you get lost. Somebody finds you they know who you are, just like on a casket. They put something with the note in it, who is the dead person there, you know? So if the flood takes the casket away, they know who that was. And the same with us, we have this underwear, and in the underwear, there's a little pocket, and it was clipped to our underwear. And if somebody finds you, he knows who you are. My dad wasn't with us because every male that was above 13 was taken away. Now this could go on for hours because I remember all of it, what happened. And anyway, we ended up with looking for a car or something. My mom has in her bra some of her gold, earrings, whatever you put in your neck, like some people I see, all the stuff was in her bra. And she took out a bracelet. It looks like a snake. I remember it very well. And she said to him, can you drive us to Bir Zayt? And he said, depends what you give me. And she said, I will give you this. He looked at it. He said, yes, come on in. Well, he drove us to downtown Bir Zayt. It was a pharmacy and a bakery. And he let us out. It was 2 o'clock after midnight. Okay, we'll go from here. We didn't know. So there was an empty house. We went inside of it. It was full of crap. People ran away because there is no bathrooms and they crapped in that building. So we went there, we moved everything away and we slept there. You're probably surprised that in the morning, there was about 100 big butterflies, as big as this, all over the place. But still we didn't know where to go. So we asked somebody, where is the church? He told us where the church is. We walked all the way into there and we met Father Antonio Buzo. his name. And from there, he made some pudding, hot cereal. He gave us to eat. And he said, go back to that building and stay there. Maybe I'll find some place for you. He did not find a place. My mother said to him, I will pay for it, you know, again from her bra. Of course, in her bra was breast that fed us milk for, you know, all of us. And we really appreciate it. And now it was full of money, gold pieces, like I said, earrings, whatever, yeah. And that was the first few days we were on that. Later on, we rented a place where the mule was living. They moved the mule and we moved in. We have to clean it, and it was, our skin in the morning was full of bites because whether they are mosquitoes or whatever they are, the biting, we were bitten quite a bit. And Mom, she started arranging in such a way that she made some balila. Balila is garbanzo beans boiled with some stuff on it. And she took a piece of paper, she made it like a cone, and she put the beans in it, and she closed it, and she put it into a flat thing that we carried with us into the coffee shops, selling it, so she would have more money to buy some more stuff for us. Those were the first few days. I really, the rest of life was like that. It was difficult, but there was no crime. Nobody attacked us or anything like this after that. But we saw enough when we were in Jaffa on the way back, where soldiers on all kinds, Jewish and non-Jewish, they stopped us and they stole the gasoline from the car because they have vehicles that needed gasoline. And they took it from our vehicle, which it was after we got out of the Haganah Jeep. It was the black taxi that we took after that to Bir Zayt. They stopped us on the way to steal more gas. And when we reached into Bir Zayt, where the guy going to his own village, he stalled. And the reason he stalled was no gasoline. So that was the first month where I was in, like somebody asked me to describe at least the first month what happened after we were kicked out. Okay, I'll stop here just to give you a picture on the hope that you will get this picture. This is the truth, like somebody was talking about the truth. This is the truth what happened. And that woman called my mom, she went through it with 6 children. And God, I cannot believe what a woman can do, how strong a woman is. And she did it. And at any rate, we end up in a country where Rumsfeld, whatever, the government that we saw before Biden. Okay, so is that what you ended up with? I want my money back. So I stopped this way. So you will, if you want to ask yourself, what is this? Why is this? Make more activities, talk about this. Let's explain it. Let's explain what they want. What do you justify today? What you don't justify? All that is coming. Okay, thank you again for inviting me to this event. Thank you.
Thank you, George, so much for that. This is Nadia speaking. I'm going to speak very briefly about some of my experiences as somebody who was born in Jordan, Palestinian, but have actually never been to Palestine. And just the stories that I heard growing up as a kid. I would often hear stories about my family. From my mother's side, I'm just going to share a screen really quickly. I would always look at pictures of the home that they lost. This was in Wadi Hnen. And this was their home here, and it's still standing today. It is actually a hospital now, and we're not allowed to visit or see it. So that's their home there. I'd hear about my grandmother loving animals and feeding the deers and taking care of them. They had large orange groves as well, speaking of trees. And I'd hear the story of the Nakba and how my grandparents were first offered to sell their home, refused, and then they were forced out of their home at gunpoint My grandmother was pregnant, so she fled to Egypt. And my grandfather walked on foot to Jordan with just the money in his pocket and was trying to create a space for his wife and new baby. And on my dad's side, they got wind of the army coming, so they fled a few days early, again, with very few belongings. And they were from Jaffa, and they left the orange groves there as well. So the famous Jaffa oranges, and speaking of trees. And so we've heard so much about these stories growing up, but I also want to share the perspective of what that looks like to me. So as somebody who was in Jordan, always very proud to be Palestinian, and then immigrated to Toronto when I was 9, still extremely proud. But then I started to hear kind of a different story, I guess, or my parents were very cautious about us telling people we're Palestinian. There was a lot of fear about doing that and the repercussions of that for our education, jobs, being labeled anti-Semitic. And so as a kid and as an adult, there was a balance of being extremely proud, but also very scared and having to bite my tongue. And I think that's what a lot of us who have never been there, but have grown up with these stories and feel so connected, also feel so frightened and so unsure how to talk about these things. And so for a very long time, I would bite my tongue when I was at a restaurant and I saw somebody talk about Israeli hummus or falafel and not correcting them, but feeling so much loss and grief, and then feeling guilty and upset for not saying anything. And so I think that's one thing I wanted to add in terms of my experience beyond just hearing those stories and feeling that connection and feeling that loss, is also not really knowing how to navigate that in a world that does not center Palestinian voices. And so I'm just so glad to be here with all of you today, with that said, and being able to speak to some of those experiences openly without fear or without being scared that something wrong will happen. So thank you so much for having me in this great event.
Thank you so much, Nadia. And now we're going to hear from Rabbi Lynn.
I don't think so.
I have that we were going to play the music, Las Arbalas.
That we're way past that. I think now we're.
Should we go into this the reading, the sorrow? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So Nabil,
Yes.
We're going back to the Haggadah, and
yes, a couple of things. First of all, just a note in here. Some of you might not have heard this before, but I'm going to read 3 short paragraphs, and then I'll read the last paragraph in Arabic, translated. So when I read it in Arabic, just know that I'm reading from the last paragraph. I just want to say something also to Rabbi Lynn. She's asking about the song. I told you that it's very painful for us to hear this because Feiruz is very near and dear to us. So when we hear her songs, and songs like this one, it is it's a very, very painful reminder of our diaspora, or whether it is forced or not forced like George and Nadia, me not forced by choice, but almost feels like it is forced by force. But anyway, so that's why that song was kind of painful for us to hear. Anyway, so let's go to the reading. We acknowledge our accountability and the need to take appropriate healing actions for the catastrophic consequences to the Palestinian people of the actions by Jews who settled and populated Israel. The Israeli government and many of these Jewish settlers forcefully seized and occupied almost all that remained of historic Palestine, killing or driving away about 750,000 Palestinians. One of the consequences was the lost fertility of Palestinian lands that were planted by the Jewish National Fund to grow quickly and acidified Palestinian soil, making it no longer suitable for farming and grazing. We take nonviolent action as called for by Palestinian civil society and ask others around the world to join us in boycotting, divesting from, and sanctioning Israel until it retreats behind the 1967 Green Line, removes its unlawful settlement, grants full equal rights to the Palestinian citizens of Israel, and recognizes the Palestinian right of return under international law. Now the reading in Arabic for the last paragraph. نتخذ إجراءات غير عنيفة كما دعا إليها المجتمع المدني الفلسطيني، ونطلب من الآخرين في جميع أنحاء العالم الانضمام إلينا في مقاطعة إسرائيل وسحب استثماراتهم وفرض عقوبات على إسرائيل حتى تتراجع إلى ما وراء خط 1967، تفكك جميع المستوطنات، تمنح حقوق متساوية كاملة للمواطنين الفلسطينيين داخل 1948 وتعترف بحق العودة للفلسطينيين بموجب القانون الدولي. Thank you.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I can speak.
I'm sorry, who is this?
My name is Lisa. May I speak?
Go ahead, I guess. Go ahead.
All right. My name is Lisa. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Assalamu alaikum to my sisters and brothers. I'm a Jew. I visited Israel and Palestine once in my life, only once. And it was very transformative. I went with the Middle East Children's Alliance, and my heart was broken. I stayed in Gaza. I was all over the West Bank. I met with Palestinian activists. I met with Jewish activists. And, you know, I only speak for me when I say Israel, the Israeli government does not speak for me. You know, what's my homeland? New York City. I will always speak out for the Palestinian people as a Jew, for Muslim people as a Jew. And there are many of us, not enough of us. More of us need to. And again, it breaks my heart to hear some of these stories. But I will never stand for what the Israeli government has done to Palestinian people from the old days till today. Never. It's a violation of being human beings.
Lisa, thank you so much for those words. We do have a time limit and we need to finish respecting the time of our rabbis and the people who are here to do the readings of the Haggadah, but thank you so much. So we're going to, George Evalt, I think it is, you're going to do a portion?
Yes, I am.
Okay, take it
To
away.
acknowledge this insensitivity to Palestinian suffering and unjustifiable theft of Palestinian homes.
Can everyone hear George?
No, can't hear.
George, I think you muted yourself accidentally.
Them when Jews drove them out of their homes and away from their lands, stealing those homes and lands in and before 1948, again in 1967, and continuing to this day. Jewish dreams of home and security were not bad or evil, but such dreams cannot be fulfilled on the backs of other people. To commemorate the sweet and sour realities of the Jewish people's history in Israel-Palestine, we pour a cup of wine or juice in repentance for the pain the Jewish dream of safety and homeland has caused the Palestinians. We will not drink this cup. Instead, we spill our wine into the symbolic common trough or second cup to remind us of the fruits not tasted and the cups not drunk by those who have been harmed. Israeli historian and activist Ilan Pappé writes, quote, in the J&F forest planted over Palestinian villages, the original flora manages to return in surprising ways. At the site of the village of Mujadil, former residents visiting nearly 60 years later found that some of the pine trees had literally split into, and now, in the middle of their broken trunks, olive trees had popped up in defiance of the alien flora planted over them 56 years ago.
Thank you, George. The passage is very encouraging. For this passage, Miriam and I are going to share it. Also, a shout out to Lisa for, speaking her truth and opening her heart. Thank you, Lisa.
Joshua, we have, before you start your part of the reading, we go to Rabbi Brant.
Oh, very good.
So we come now to the second category of food in our Seder, and that is food that is represented by fruit or nuts that have edible outside with a hard internal core or pit. According to Jewish mysticism, these foods symbolize the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation. Yetzirah also embodies political transformation, the struggle to extend justice to all who live upon the land. In this category, we highlight olives or zaytun, another fruit that is indigenous to the land of Palestine. Olive trees, as we've heard a few times now, of course, have grown in Palestine for centuries, growing for hundreds and even thousands of years. In Palestine, the olive harvest occurs in the fall months of October and November. Harvesting olive trees is a key economic, familial, and social activity for many Palestinians who take days off work to tend their lands or those of their relatives, neighbors, or friends. Between 80,000 and 100,000 families rely on olives and olive oil as essential sources of income. And as we've also heard, as settlements continue to expand in the West Bank, olive trees have become a primary target of Israeli authorities and settlers. Since 1967, they have uprooted almost 1 million Palestinian olive trees, often under the protection of the Israeli military. During the harvest this past fall, Palestinians and human rights activists reported some of the worst violence ever, which included the widespread destruction of trees and beatings of Palestinian farmers. I'm sure there are many at this Seder who have participated in the growing international movement of activists who travel to Palestine to assist with the harvest and stand in solidarity with Palestinian farmers. Through this sacred work, we are learning what it means to be truly accountable to those who struggle for their liberation. As we eat these olives today, then, let us reaffirm the sacred power of solidarity. We say now the blessing, and I'll post it one more time in the chat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri ha'etz. Blessed are you, our God, Spirit of the universe, creator of the fruit of the tree.
Amen.
We go back to the reading now. So Joshua.
Thank you, Rabbi Rosen. Going back to the trees of reparations, when we fulfill our nature when we plant. We degrade it when we uproot. We plant when we live in a manner that reveals the connection between all things. We uproot when we live in a manner that separates and divides. We see that Adam is Adama, human is earth. We cease to be separate from our place. Ceasing to be separate, we cease to war with others. Ceasing to war within ourselves, we ceasing to be separate, we cease to war within ourselves. Ceasing to war within ourselves, we cease to war among ourselves. And then we would have no need to stop our planting to greet the Messiah. For then we would greet the Messiah in each seedling we plant, in each sapling we water, in each tree we prune and harvest, in each face we meet. Rome Shapiro, Remembering Nature.
Our task now is to engage in the work of repairing the vast human, emotional, and ecological damage done across the land called Israel and Palestine, and to create conditions in which Jews and Palestinians can make new relationships within and between their communities.
Please join us in solidarity with Palestinians and at their request in this global nonviolent struggle for justice and preservation of the Palestinian people, their history and culture, their lands, their trees, their dignity, and their freedom. To support peace by creating greater economic justice, Jewish Voice for Peace Detroit has committed to planting olive trees in Palestine. The saplings that will be planted will someday contribute in a material way to the livelihoods of the farmers and their families who suffer as a result of the Israeli occupation. Even more than the act of planting, JVP's task is to begin the conversation among Jews about what the occupation has meant for Palestinians and for a land that is called holy. This Trees of Reconciliation project will help to repair the fields, but it will also help to start a dialogue about our history in Israel, Palestine, and the work we all must do to heal and repair. We invite each of you to donate today to this campaign by making a donation to the Middle East Children's Alliance, a nonprofit organization that will forward the funds to the Palestinian Farmers Union, a network of Palestinian farmers. And I'm sure that those contact addresses can be put in the chat and are also in the program.
Thank you, Kim. And thank you all for adding tzedakah to our gathering, the sacred act of just giving to our Seder today. The third category of food in our Seder is represented by food that is edible all the way through. According to Jewish mysticism, these foods symbolize the world of Bria, the world of creation. Bria represents pure thought and aspiration, the knowledge of what is truly possible. In this category, we highlight grapes and figs. In Palestine, the grape and fig harvests occur in the midsummer, during the months of August and September. Like the olive, grapes and figs are staples of Palestinian cuisine and culture. They are, of course, also important symbols of biblical tradition. The book of Micah describes an era of justice and peace by saying, "Everyone will sit under their vine and fig tree, and no one will make them afraid." And an amazing and powerful image and vision of a world in which no one feels vulnerable any longer. These foods remind us that justice is not merely an aspiration or vision. It is a tangible, palpable reality that we know from history is indeed possible. This is, in fact, a central teaching of Tu B'Shvat, the winter holiday that reminds us that spring is coming, even if we cannot yet see it. We know from experience that rebirth and renewal of spring is inevitable. It is, in fact, woven into the very fabric of creation. We must not and cannot forget this, even in the depths of a cold, dark winter. When we eat food such as grapes and figs, food that can be eaten completely through and through, we are reminded that our struggles can and do bear fruit. Pharaohs can be brought down. Institutions of slavery can be abolished. Apartheid can be dismantled. Refugees can return to their homes. And so together, let's take one of those foods, if you have grapes or figs or anything else that can be eaten all the way through. And if you have grapes, by the way, that is Berei Pri HaGafen, not Berei Pri HaEtz. So feel free to say the proper blessing. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Berei Pri HaEtz. Blessed are you, our God, Spirit of the universe, creator of the fruit of the tree, or the fruit of the vine.
We go to the final page of the Haggadah. Nadia?
Thank you. We invite each of you to donate tonight to this campaign by making a donation to Mecca, as previously mentioned, the Middle East Children Alliance. It's a nonprofit organization that works with Palestinian farmers and organizations. It's not possible to replace what is lost when people are displaced, land and a way of life is destroyed, 1,000-year-old olive trees uprooted. In Palestine, scores of 2,000-year-old cities and historical sites are buried under JNF planted forests and parks. Rebuilding and replanting are acts of daily resistance in Palestine.
This project seeks to support the ongoing struggle of Palestinians to rebuild by providing resources for villages to plant trees that are indigenous to Palestine's natural environment and agricultural life. Please consider making a tax-deductible donation to plant trees. The link is on the back cover of the Haggadah. It's also in the chat. Please help us. This money will go directly to the Palestinian Farmers Union, a network of Palestinian farmers to plant trees in the spring. Today and every day that people come together to rededicate themselves to the work for peace with justice in Israel-Palestine is a beginning. To honor this moment together, we pick up a seed, the universal symbol of a new beginning, a moment when a new understanding has begun to take root and a new direction has become clear. Over to Rabbi Brant.
So the fourth and final category, I'm inviting my friend Rabbi Lynn to join me as well. The fourth category is beyond representation by any fruit. It is the world of Atzilut. It is the highest of all worlds, and it is a world that is almost not really a category itself. It is the world to come, the world in which we are not currently living, but that we are struggling for, and as I said before, know is truly possible. And during ceremonies such as this, during festivals such as Tu B'Shvat, or even weekly gatherings for Shabbat, we allow ourselves to dwell in that world. We step out of the world as it is, and we step into the world to come, to replenish ourselves, to renew ourselves, to fill ourselves up with just a bit of a taste of what that world might be like, so that we will be that much more ready when the festival is over to rededicate ourselves to making it possible. So I'd just like to read to you a poetic rendering of Psalm 92, which is, among other things, said on the evening of Shabbat, but is really, at its core, a vision of what that world might be, and an opportunity for us to actually dwell in that world for these few moments. Tonight, this Tu B'Shvat, we raise the cup. This Tu B'Shvat will breathe deeply and dwell in a world without borders, without limit in space or in time, a world beyond wealth or scarcity, a world where there is nothing for us to do but to be. They said this world would never come, yet here we are. The surging waters have receded. There is no oppressor, no oppressed, no power but the one coursing through every living, breathing, satiated soul. Memories of past battles fading like dry grass in the warm sun. No more talk of enemies and strategies. No more illusions, no more dreams. Only this eternal moment of victory to celebrate and savor the world as we always knew it could be. See how the justice we planted in the deep, dark soil now soars impossibly skyward, rising up like a palm tree, like a cedar, flourishing forever, ever swaying, ever bending, but never breaking. So this Tu B'Shvat, we raise the cup. Tomorrow we'll breathe deeply to savor a world recreated. And when the sun sets once again, we continue the struggle. And with that, I turn it over now to my good friend, Rabbi Lynn.
I pray that we all have the opportunity to see that dream. And the world to come is not only the future, but the possibility that we create in the present, as has been said. And I invite you to envision what that world looks like. May the world to come include reparations for all the harms of Zionism. May the world to come, and may it be tomorrow and today, include the right of return, that refugees may go home. May the world to come include guarantees of non-repeat of all the harms that we have caused. May the world to come include a deep understanding of true histories. May the world to come include the celebration of people in their culture with full dignity. And as Rabbi Brant said, where none shall be afraid to speak their own truth and to be welcome May the world to come include reparations, which help create a culture of repair. And may our children and our children's children and our children's children's children tend trees that have been planted in a peaceful land. I say amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much. We will now all together, and if everybody wants to unmute, all together the very last section on the bottom of the Haggadah. We close our Seder with these words. May they be heard and echoed throughout the nations. All land is holy. All people are chosen.
All people are
Full equality, Israeli, Jews,
for all Palestinian citizens of Israel,
and for all Palestinians
under Israeli
living
occupation.
under
Israeli occupation.
And in the diaspora.
Right.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our participants today, to our rabbis for helping to guide us through this afternoon. Matt Clark is the chair of our JVP Detroit chapter. Matt, do you want to close us up with a fast message?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, before
Barbara.
you do that, after Matt speaks, I'm going to share with you some music by the Michigan Arab Orchestra that features our friend, oud player Victor Ganem, and we should please keep him in your prayers. He is healing. Okay, go ahead, Matt.
Okay, can you hear me? All right.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And I want to give a special thanks to Barbara Bearfield. I mean, she has put a lot of work behind the scenes making this event happen, and we appreciate it. Her work is essential here. I want to thank everyone for being here today, especially give thanks to Huwaida, George, Nadia for sharing their experiences related to the Nakba. I want to thank Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb and Rabbi Brant Rosen for your essential work on this. Thank you for Kim Redigan for sharing her experiences. I want to talk a little bit about JVP and our message and our work, and I will also echo our member Josh Feinstein had said earlier today that he remembers to B-Shvat, and I had the same experience. I remember as a kid donating money and celebrating the so-called planting of trees in Israel. We never knew that we were contributing to oppression and the colonization of Palestine. I'd never met a Palestinian for many, many years, never got that point of view. And now that I know better, I personally don't want to be part of a Jewish community unless we are standing with Palestine and Palestinians in their freedom struggle. And I'm grateful for Jewish Voice of Peace for being a beautiful Jewish community where we can do that. Our Detroit chapter, we're involved in many events, educational events, activist work. We work with Palestinian groups. We support the Palestinian boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. We do have an upcoming event coming up next weekend, January 29th. That's at 2 o'clock. There's an organization and one of our members, Tasneem Sultan, is involved with. It's called Connecting with Humanity. We're hosting a poetry workshop. Detroit Jewish Voice of Peace is co-hosting, and that's poets from several different groups, including a Palestinian group, We Are Not Numbers. So please check it out. You can check us out on Facebook, on Twitter, and please join our meetings. I mean, we would love to work with anybody who's committed to these issues and committed to working for Palestine. You don't have to be Jewish to be part of Jewish Voice of Peace. We welcome people of all backgrounds, of all faiths. We have chapter meetings every every second Monday of the month by Zoom these days. Our next one is February 14th, which is Valentine's Day. I'll say that is how dedicated we are as we're meeting on Valentine's Day. It's 7 o'clock on the 14th, and you're more than welcome to join us and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. I'm going to send our email for anybody who otherwise wants to contact us. And we appreciate very much your participation in this event. Have a great rest of your week.
Cole, he's my miracle child.